Okay, in this video, I'm pleased to introduce you to Alex Lee, who is a senior Snowflake engineer. Is that right, Alex?
That's correct, yes.
And me and Alex have done work in the past, and when we met recently at Data for Breakfast, Alex suggested he would do a nice demo about a new feature. Alex, I think it's not generally available yet. Is that right?
That's correct. So the dynamic table feature is actually in private preview at the moment, but the good part about this is the streaming Snowpipe stuff is actually in public preview at the moment. So it's
Oh,
actually
great.
something that you can actually try today.
Brilliant. So if you're interested in this, you can actually get your hands on it as well. So yeah, so as Alex mentioned there, it's the dynamic tables, which were originally introduced as materialized tables, confusingly last year at Summit, but now they've been
That's
rebranded
right.
as dynamic tables. Alex is going to take us through, tell us what they are, and then go through a quick demo to show us actually how you would use them as well. Because I think for me, it's quite an exciting feature. It
Mhm.
removes a lot of the complexity, I think, as well, that people have just getting up and running natively with Snowflake and needing to load data in a near real-time basis onto their Snowflake account.
Mhm.
Often you need additional tools to do some of this and orchestrate some of that as well. Okay, Alex, and I think when you're ready, you can go ahead and share your screen.
There we go. Lovely. So yeah, so really today's topic for me is about the streaming Snowpipe and dynamic tables as well. So I've got a couple of slides that just explains the whole process and how it all fits in. So that and Adam, by all means, ask any questions along the way as well.
Absolutely will do. Let's get into it,
Mhm.
Alex.
Excellent. So, like Adam said, I'm Alex Lee. I'm part of the sales engineering team here at Snowflake. I'm based in Sydney. So, yeah, by any means, let me know if you're interested in this topic and give us a shout if you are interested. So, without further ado, I'm just going to pop the quick Snowflake disclaimer here just to let you know that some of these features are talking about future technology. So, therefore, purchased using the existing feature set that's available with Snowflake. All right. So, this is actually a very good slide that actually explains how data ingestion and data engineering actually works with Snowflake. So on the left-hand side, you can see that Snowflake not only ingests structured data like tables and views, but also semi-structured, the things like JSON, XML, Parquet, those types of files, and also unstructured data. So I guess in today's demo, we're going to highlight a couple of those, including Snowpipe streaming and the Kafka connector, but also declarative pipelines with dynamic tables. Okay, so those are the two things that we're talking about today.
Great. And
Like we
Alex,
mentioned before, yeah, go
sorry
ahead.
to jump in, Alex. Are we going to be using just structured data or a mixture of semi-structured data types as well?
So it's going to be IoT data. So
Okay.
we're going to synthetically generate Kafka topics. So there will be a Kafka topic that we're subscribing to, and we're actually loading that in via the Kafka connector.
Brilliant. Okay, that'll be interesting.
Yeah, definitely. So once we ingested it using the Snowpipe streaming side of things, we're going to be using a more declarative way of actually creating this, I guess, the pipelines using dynamic tables. So from the ingestion into the transformation side. All right, so why do this, right? So it really is about simplifying the architecture. You're no longer having to actually separate streaming and batch data pipelines with Snowflake. So being able to actually do both in a single platform is really powerful. It works with streaming data really easily. So the serverless ingestion and automating transformations is easily done using the joins method. And it's native to the Snowflake Data Cloud, right? So being able to actually expand that ecosystem of the data cloud, actually having more and more data sets inside the Snowflake Data Cloud becomes, I guess, transformational in terms of, having that entire data platform scenario. So actually being able to ingest more data into Snowflake, and then also being able to actually share those with other, consumers inside of the Snowflake network, essentially creating that network effect.
Yeah, great. And I totally agree. I mean, I think adding third-party tools, as you would have seen other clients potentially do to meet some of these requirements previously, such as
Mm,
orchestration and managing the different frequency of loads,
mm,
obviously adds a layer of complexity there and cost. So to do this natively right within the Snowflake platform, and then to leverage the tools out of the box around that security and governance framework to make it easier to manage and not have that level of complexity to deal with, I think is hugely compelling. So that's one of the reasons why I was very keen when I found out This was on the roadmap for you to take some people through
Yeah.
this, because I think people will really kind of get a lot of value from this.
Yes. Yes, definitely. Absolutely. So I'll just quickly show you a little bit behind the covers how this is all going to work. So what I've done here is showing you the two methods. So the traditional method of actually ingesting into Snowflake via what we call Snowpipe. And that's really a file-based mechanism, right? So that's something that's GA today. And it's designed for, batched row set. So we're talking about auto ingesting in terms of, around the 10 megabyte files, like and 10 million files in 10 terabytes per hour kind of scenarios. And it does dedupe and also file tracking as well, right? So those are the capabilities of the existing Snowpipe that we have today. What we're talking about in terms of the new technology is what we call Snowpipe streaming. So like I said, it's in public preview now. It's really about, being able to ingest things that are not files. They're more in terms of the row sets, and you can subscribe to a Kafka topic. And so rather than me saying this one replaces something else, it's a complementary, right? So it depends on the workload and the data source that you've got. Some are more applicable to do via, the batch method where we actually copying files in. Other times you need something that's a bit more streamlined in terms of being able to actually do a near real time kind of scenario. So that's where the streaming Snowpipe comes in.
Got it. And just one question for you, Alex, with regards to the use of the Kafka connector for event method streaming. Am I right in thinking that you needed to stage that data first, to use it before you can ingest that data into Snowflake? And does that now go away? Can you stream data directly into Snowflake, or do you still need to stage that data on its way in?
Absolutely. So that's a really, really good question. So the streaming Snowpipe now removes the need to actually have a stage. We're actually ingesting direct Kafka topics. So you're actually loading in rows at a time into the final table. So rather than you having to muck around with, creating a stage, managing that, obviously Snowflake does that to an extent, but it's an additional step. With Snowpipe streaming, that goes away.
Yeah, great. I'm glad we cleared that up, right? Because that is, again, another thing that just streamlines that whole process and simplifies that architecture. Again, something that goes back to that point where the maintenance overhead is just far more reduced and you can just get up and running far faster. So it's great to see
Yeah,
that evolution of
definitely.
these capabilities.
Yes, like all things in Snowflake, we're actually trying to make things simpler, not harder and more
Yeah,
complicated. But
yeah. But
so,
you've
yeah,
got to tackle the harder problems now, whilst keep that ethos of simplicity true, right? And so it
yes,
gets more challenging.
yes. I think there are very, very smart people at Snowflake that's doing a lot of that great work for us.
Absolutely. Someone's working very hard behind the scenes anyway, that's for sure.
That is for sure. All right. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of a context of what this demo looks like. We are essentially going to merge two tables together using the dynamic table structure. So we spoke quite a bit about this Snowpipe streaming already. So this is where we actually get a Kafka topic and actually use the Snowpipe streaming capability to actually load into what we call the streaming ads record. Right. So this is actually an ad campaign kind of idea where we actually slowly actually getting ingestion of ad campaign information, but obviously we're trying to map that to a campaign, right? So different types of campaign, and we're actually merging them together in a dynamic way using what we call dynamic tables. So that's really how it hung about in terms of the actual demo itself. How it materializes, I'm just going to change over to my demo now. So I've got a Docker container, which essentially has a number of elements in it. So a zookeeper, obviously the Kafka topic, the Kafka queue. So you've actually opened this up. What I'm actually seeing is a stream of information being loaded into the Kafka topic. So this is me just showing you behind the scenes how this is working. You probably don't need to know any of this because obviously as data gets ingested into a Kafka topic, this happens automatically, right? So you don't normally get to see any of this, but it's something good to know.
Sure, and it makes it a lot
The
easier
other
for you
thing I was going to show you,
to test it as well, Alex, right? So for testing purposes, and demo purposes, obviously making it a lot easier for you to show something that's relative to the real world as well, right?
that's correct. Yeah, definitely. So what I've done in my demo Snowflake account, as you can see here, obviously it's the Snowflake UI that I'm using. So this is the Snowsite UI. Some of our obviously some of our viewers may have seen the classic version. This is now the new version of our user interface. So you can see here, it's really just using SQL code. What I'm doing is I'm actually setting up some context behind this. So I'm setting up which warehouse am I using, which database am I using, and also which schema. We have already created this add campaign map table. So if you saw behind the slide there, we've created that mapping table so that we can actually match up the actual individual Kafka rows as it's being ingested with this actual mapping data. So that's something that's already pre-created. This here is the interesting part.
This
so
is the magic. This is the magic right here.
Magic, right? So this right here is what we call the dynamic table. The syntax, like all things in SQL, is fairly straightforward and easy to comprehend. So you can see here, the key word here is the dynamic table piece. I've created a dynamic table called campaign spend, and I've actually set it up with a lag of 1 minute. So the minimum is 1 minute, or obviously you can actually change that lag. What's happening behind the scenes is Snowflake's doing all that stitching up for you, right? So what it's actually doing is essentially using a warehouse. So we're using still a virtual warehouse in this instance, but Snowflake's managing all of that for you.
And when you say Snowflake's managing that, Alex, so you specified a warehouse to use. Is that line optional? So if you remove that line, would it create a managed compute warehouse in the background for you, or do you need to specify that?
You do have to specify at this point in time, although saying that obviously things do change at Snowflake. So you might at some point find that we might create a serverless version of this as well.
Yeah, okay. That's good to know though.
Yeah. So this is where the magic happens, right? So the select statement, what I want in that table. So rather than you having to create multiple steps of an ETL transformation, you ultimately just say, I want to see this as the end result.
And it will refresh on that lag time. So this is the bit that I'm just going to blow people's mind because they're thinking, hang on, there's something missing here, you know, because ultimately there you've defined a dynamic table in Snowflake terms, you've given it a name, but instead of specifying the typical kind of columns, data types that you would typically associate with the DDL as part of creating the table, you've actually added a lag. Lowest is 1 minute to refresh that data automatically behind the scenes. You've specified the warehouse to use to provide the compute to do that refreshing of the data. And then you can actually transform that data almost on the fly by just writing native SQL, and that will automatically output a table. Like, because I just it just seems too easy.
It's blowing your mind, isn't it?
It is. And I just think when you see it like that, where it's native SQL that's wrapped in a create table statement, in a way, right? You know what that reminds me of? It reminds me of DBT and the models that you create in DBT, right? It's like a target table is defined by a piece of SQL called a model in DBT. Obviously, the slightly different paradigms, but it's the same thing. You're not specifying column name, data type, that kind of thing. You're actually writing the transformational logic to get to that endpoint and almost removing a step in between, ultimately,
Ultimately, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make it simpler to do all these things, right? So rather than you having to, like you said, do all those intermediary steps to get to the end result, we're basically creating that or using a very simple interface to interact. Cool. All right. So that's essentially what we've done. If I actually did a quick count of that, I've got about 93 rows in this campaign spend table. I'm going to flick over to a different worksheet now just to show you what's actually happening. So I'm going to set up the context again. So these are just the normal behind the scenes setups for warehouse, database, and schema. Remember this streaming ad record. So we've actually created, so that's the ingesting data, right? So these are the number of records that's actually being ingested using that Kafka topic via streaming Snowpipe. So as we refresh that, that's going to increase in the number of topics. You saw behind the scenes, the Docker containers really just inserting extra rows into this table. And so you've actually did a quick lookup of actually how many records are in here. I can actually see the actual raw JSON information as well, right? So I can actually look at that. If I actually look look at the right-hand side over here, you can see that Snowflake automatically recognizes it's actually a JSON data type and actually formats it accordingly. So I'm just showing you what's in this streaming ads record table. It's really a JSON array that I've actually ingested. JSON being a first class citizen or data type inside Snowflake, it automatically gets recognized. We can actually do a lot in Snowflake with JSON as well. So I'm just going to go through the rest of the demo here. I'm just going to look at the actual ad mapping table. So you saw previously in that, I guess the architecture of this demo, this is the one that we are actually trying to map to, right? So ultimately, those two tables that I've just shown you, the streaming ad record table, as well as the ad campaign map table, is actually the two sources where the dynamic table is actually being merged together. So here it is, right? So this is actually the campaign spend table. If you actually ran the query on that, you can see that it looks and behaves just like a normal table. Because of the 1 minute lag, we'll probably have to have a bit of a chat before these things get updated, but that's essentially it. So for me, the benefit is I'm actually doing one single create statement that's doing all that work behind the scenes for me. It's now automatically refreshing on that 1 minute schedule to actually give me the most recent, version of this campaign spend.
So one of the key call out, Alex, as part of this demo is using JSON data, and some of the more traditional database management systems didn't necessarily handle that natively like Snowflake does. So you also don't need to worry about shredding that into relational columns ahead of time. You're doing that within the transformational logic that we just saw on your other worksheet in terms of the expression that you've got behind the dynamic table. So I think it's another thing worth pointing out, especially if people are watching this coming from an Oracle, Teradata, SQL Server, you name it, background. This is again a game changer where you can bring data in JSON, load it straight into like a variant column in Snowflake, and then you can work with it natively and flatten that data so it looks relational, like we've got on the screen, right? It's a really
Definitely.
big value add component as well, and thankfully you've weaved it into this nice demo for us as well.
Yeah, definitely. So it's super simple. You know the capabilities of the select statement being able to actually do lateral flattens of actual JSON. So that's actually a key component of our SQL compiler. It's actually really, really good at doing that. And like you said, it's first-class citizen object. So therefore, it's really super easy to use as well. So to finish this demo off, really it's just about, being able to actually demonstrate that the lag that's actually happened between the time that we spoke to the time that, now. So I can actually rerun the exact same query, right? And you'll notice down the bottom that the actual more data would have been loaded in. And so therefore, it's dynamically changing based on the input of that information. One thing I probably want to call out is on the right-hand side, you've got this amazing ability without you even touching a piece of code in Snowflake to look at, analysis of information. So I can actually do, total clicks information, total cost, those types of things are actually available to you by default. You don't even have to lift a finger, right? All this information coming out from the data that you've got in those tables. So it's another way that Snowflake's actually making your life better. You can actually create directly from this stuff, our charting capability inside Snowflake as well. So it's all about, being able to actually improve and increase the, the value of the data that you have inside of Snowflake. So just something to finish off, a little bit to do a comparison between what's being ingested and what's actually in the, the campaign spend dynamic table. So you can actually monitor how big a difference between the two is. So you can actually, at any time, you can actually count the number of rows on the campaign spend dynamic table. So you got about 13,000 there. If I looked at the actual raw table, there's a difference, right? So this is based on that lag that we talked about a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
So yeah, with that, I think that's really ultimately my demo that I've showcased there. Hopefully that's given you a little bit of a perspective of how dynamic table works. Yeah. So any other questions, Adam?
I guess just one question just to finish off, and I think it's a great demo because it's super simple, but that's kind of where the value lies, right? People can get wrap their heads around it with a nice simple demo. But just to kind of turn it around where we've seen the value and where dynamic tables and Snowpipe streaming can really help customers. Are there any particular use cases then where you wouldn't recommend this? If what kind of use cases would it turn into an anti-pattern then? Do you have anything along those lines where it makes sense to use it versus some other cases where it
Mm.
definitely doesn't for one reason or another?
Yeah, I think, dynamic tables comes from a place where if you're looking at streaming data, that's where sweet spot is. If you've got more traditional methods of ingestion, like bulk loads overnight, there's very little value in terms of being able to dynamically refresh that, right? So I think you have to understand your data set and look at any point in time, if you are interested in something like this, by all means, reach out to, I guess, one of the Snowflake representatives that we have. Like obviously, we've got people right across ANZ that can help you with that. So I think that's a really good call out.
It is absolutely, Alex. And listen, thanks so much for this valuable demo and spending the time around dynamic tables and Snowpipe streaming. What we'll
Mhm.
do is when I put the video out there on LinkedIn as well, I'll tag you, Alex. So if anybody has any further follow-on questions after watching this, I assume they're okay to kind of drop you a note and ask you about it, if that's okay.
Yeah, definitely. I expect people to call out and actually ask any questions because I think this is actually super amazing and awesome what we're actually doing with, being able to actually very quickly deliver value right inside our platform.
Absolutely, I agree, and it's going to be a game changer, when it goes to general availability as well, Alex, and more people can get their hands on it. So listen, with that, thanks so much for your time, Alex. Take Alex up on the offer. If you've got any questions, definitely put them in the comments when I post this on LinkedIn later on. But in the meantime, Alex, thanks so much for your time, and we'll wrap it up there.
Thank you, Adam. Cheers.